What's up? So my name's Adam Morgan. For those of you who don't know me, for those of you who aren't subscribed to this channel, this is a new video series that I'm working on, and what I want to do is basically move some of the conversations that I have online and some of the conversations that I have in person to a video format that can hopefully reach more people. A little bit of background about me. I got into tech about 5 years ago. I was working in marketing consulting. I was a data analyst, so it was a little bit technical, but I wasn't writing web apps. I wasn't writing code. I was basically writing queries to pull data out of a database. Like, that's all I was doing. And after a while, I realized, this thing isn't for me. I wanted to get into a higher growth industry. Programming was big, and I thought, you know what? Let's do it. So what I want to talk about today is the number one mistake that new programmers make. Because I got into this industry without any experience on my resume. Like, I didn't have Stanford on my resume. I didn't have Georgia Tech. I didn't have internships at Facebook and Google. I didn't have any of this. I had marketing consulting at some company nobody's ever heard of, and I was trying to get into the industry. And one of the things I learned really quick was how little the few programming courses I had in college would get me. Like, I took a couple of programming courses in college, but they were super basic. You basically learned nothing. I thought at the time that I was ready to be a programmer, and that's kind of why I got into it. I was like, hey, this is an easy thing for me to transition to. Why not just use the skills that I learned for programming in college and get into tech? Sounds great. Turns out I didn't learn that much, so immediately I was hit with this realization. I was like, okay, I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did. I'm going to have to learn how to teach myself, or I'm going to have to teach myself how to program. I'm going to have to learn a new skill. And the number one mistake that people make, and this is something I've had this conversation so many times. People look at me, they're like, man, you taught yourself how to program with no experience in the industry, and now you're self-employed. You work for yourself. How did you do it? And I'll ask them, I'm like, are you learning how to program? Like, what are you doing? They're like, yeah, I'm learning. I'm like, how long you been learning? And I shit you not, a guy I had a conversation with not too long ago told me he'd been learning how to program on and off for 5 years. 5 years. That's as much time as you spend in college where you're studying multiple subjects. You get to filter yourself down to one topic, learning how to program, and it's still taking them 5 years. And that's the mistake that people make. They say, you know what, I'm going to learn how to program, but then they do it on and off. And guess what? When you do something on and off, you're not really learning anything. You learn a little bit, you take a bunch of time off, and then once you're like, okay, I'm going to get back into this programming thing, you're basically starting from zero. It's not like you have all of this knowledge that you're like, okay, that's where I was, and I'm going to build off from here. You forget a lot of it. If you're not solidifying it, if you're not doing it every day, you're going to forget that stuff. It's going to be gone. So the number one thing I've noticed, people who have taught themselves how to program and get into the industry, people who want to get into the industry and can't, and sometimes, are teaching themselves how to program for 5 years, bullshit. That's not 5 years. I programmed a little bit this week, 3 months from now I did another week. You've had a goal across 5 years, but you're not actively trying to get a job, or you're not actively learning for 5 years. It's just been this goal that you've had for the past 5 years. So the differentiation, the deciding factor between the two is consistency. It's that people who are serious about getting into the industry, they say, all right, this is something I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it basically every day. Everybody else I talk to that can't get a job, they're on and off programmers. You're never going to get good enough if you're doing it on and off. It's like anything else in life. It's like somebody saying, I want to look like The Rock. But then they say, oh, I'm just going to work out on and off. Nobody would honestly think, dude, you're setting yourself up for success. You're 100% going to look like The Rock. Of course not. That dude's in the gym every day. Yeah, there's some steroids too, but the majority of it is him being in the gym every single day. You can't get to that doing on and off programming. So, how do you avoid on and off programming? I think the biggest piece of advice I would give you, and it's not always the easiest, is to get a buddy. You want a buddy system. Because if you're just doing it by yourself, it's hard. You're going to get frustrated. It's not going to be the most fun thing in the world. But when you do it with a friend like I did, which it was just kind of a perfect timing. I quit my job, he quit his job, we were both trying to get into programming. We're like, hey, maybe we can do this together. So that's what we did. And when you do that, one, you have motivation, because if you quit, you have to also tell that person that you're quitting, and then you're just leaving them by yourself. So there's less incentive to quit. I think this is why group fitness classes are so big. You know, it's the fact that you get to do it with other people. You get to suffer collectively. And when you're suffering collectively, it's not that bad. And even when you're doing it with one other person, it is less bad than it would be if you were doing it yourself. On top of that, you also get, you know, like a Venn diagram of knowledge. There's going to be things that you're going to understand, and there's going to be things you don't understand. Hopefully, your friend that you're learning with has things that they understand, and you know, you can mix and match. You can, okay, that makes sense to you, it doesn't make sense to me, explain it to me. And sometimes the best teachers, the best explanations come from people who are just starting out, because they just had to make sense of it 5 minutes ago, right? The people who have been doing it for years, it's so solidified that it's hard for them to comprehend how you wouldn't understand it. So when you have a buddy, not only do you have motivation to push through it, but you also have somebody who, you know, might understand something that you don't, and then you can just share knowledge between each other. And this is something that me and my friend actually did, because when we were learning how to program, he kind of gravitated more towards back end. I gravitated more towards front end. And when we were working through Michael Hartle's Rails tutorial, it was very helpful because it helped us divide the web stack. You know, you have full-blown web apps where you have an API communicating with a front end. If you're trying to get all of that at once, it's going to be a lot. Whereas we were kind of able to divide and conquer, and then to this day, we've stuck with those specialties. He's consistently a back-end developer. I've done full stack a few times, but I'm primarily hired for front end. Now, when I say consistency, when I say that you can't be an on and off programmer, I get you have schedules, you might have a full-time job, I understand all that. It doesn't have to literally be every single day, but at least have some sort of schedule. Like start out and say, okay, you know what? Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm going to do those 3 days. Every day, I'm going to code for an hour. You know, don't even do Friday because happy hours are going to come up. You want to get an early start on the weekend. Like, just know you're not going to commit to Friday. Do it earlier in the week. Just do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You know, that way you just kind of get it out of the way. It's an early part of your week. You know you have to do it. You get it done, and then you get it out of the way. You can still get a lot done if you set time aside. If you say, okay, these days of the week for an hour and a half, I'm going to code. That's way better than just having this arbitrary goal of I'm going to learn how to program. Because you can kind of get into the state where you're neither succeeding or failing because it's such an ambiguous goal. Whereas if you say, I'm going to code 4 days a week for an hour on each of those 4 days, if you don't code for 4 hours that week, you failed. You actually set a goal and you didn't hit it. So I can't stress this enough. If somebody comes up to me and they ask me about getting a job in programming, it's such a key element that is almost the first thing I'm going to go to. I'm going to say, how long have you been trying to program it and how often are you doing it? Because if their answer is, oh, you know, I'm doing it every now and then, it's like, okay, that's why you're not getting it. Because everybody I know who has taught themselves how to program, who can get jobs without even a college degree sometimes, they did the work. They made something to at least show an employer, hey, I taught myself, here's the thing I made. You can go to www.here'smyapplication.com. That's a thing I made. Everybody else is not making anything. They're not programming every day. They're on and off programming, and then they're like, why am I not getting a job? I mean, going back to my own experiences, when I was just starting out and, you know, I was trying to get my job, I was unemployed. I quit my job. I was like, you know, those programming courses in college, I'll be all right. I'll be able to get a job. Quickly realized nobody wanted to hire me. I was getting interviews, but I was just bombing them. I didn't have the programming chops that they wanted. And I realized, okay, I have to learn how to program. I obviously don't know as much as I thought I did, and I obviously don't know as much as they want me to know. So for me, personally, because I was unemployed, I had an advantage. All day, every day was open to me. So me and my friend, we would literally wake up, go to Georgia Tech Library, code, get lunch, bitch about how hard it was to learn how to program, and then we'd go back to the library and start coding some more. This is what we did like every single day. It sucked. It was horrible. It was not fun. But why do you think programmers get paid so much, and why do you think there aren't as many programmers as companies want to hire? It's because it's not fun. It's not the most enjoyable thing to learn. It's not as easy as something like history where, you know, you sit down for a test and they're like, the killing of Franz Ferdinand started which war? You can just Wikipedia that. Like, that's easy. Learning programming is hard because it's not as clear-cut as that. You can't just Google a fact on Wikipedia and there's the answer. Let me just memorize it and ace this test. It's a different beast. So if you're wanting to get into the industry, if you're like, this is something I want to do, I want to be a software developer, I want to get into tech, I've been learning how to program for a while and things aren't going anywhere, you have to ask yourself, am I being consistent with this? Is this something that I'm regularly doing so that I'm actually able to create some sort of output that I can then show to somebody and say, look, I'm learning and here's a thing I made. If you're just in this cycle of doing tutorials, you're never going to get anywhere. If you're just like, 1 week I'll do a React tutorial, okay, I'm done with programming for this month. The next month you do Vue, okay, I'm done with programming for a month. The next month you do Angular, it's never gonna happen. You have to get in the habit of saying, okay, I have those 4 days every week that I'm gonna sit down and code. And if you miss a day, you do it the next day. But you just can't get into the cycle where you just don't code. On and off programming is going to kill you. On and off anything is gonna kill you. If you wanna get good at something, on and off practice just doesn't work. And the same thing applies to programming. So when you finally decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to learn how to program, and it sucks and it isn't fun, just understand it's normal. And if you need convincing, look at the labor market. Look at how much they're getting paid. Look at how few people there are programming. There's a reason for it. It's normal. Everybody's been through it. I've been through it myself. It sucked at the time, but I'm glad I made it through. So avoid the #1 programming mistake. Don't be an on and off programmer. All right, end rant. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate you subscribing to the channel. At the very least, just click the like button so that other people can find this. And if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, feel free to leave a comment below and your question might be a future video.